afternoon, audience and distinguished panelists and all the ASEAN-backed delegates. It's such an honor for me to be here today to present about ASEAN's roadmap to build a thriving talent hub for the region. Let me start by actually giving you a bit of context why discussing about this topic is so important for ASEAN. So if you look, ASEAN played a very important role in the overall global world economy. The economy is expected to grow 40% faster than global GDP growth. And here, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, and Vietnam will contribute 75% of the ASEAN growth. And ASEAN will also have a net positive trade balance of over 100 billion. Second, we also see that by 2030, ASEAN will be home for more than 720 million people. So again, this is a very big number. And what's very good about ASEAN is that 67% of them are in working age. So that means ASEAN will have a demographic bonus, which will then fuel the growth of the overall economy. When we look at the ASEAN talent, and this is based on a recent survey done, most of the ASEAN talent, they have a desire to work in the industries that is actually aligned with the structure of the economy of majority of the ASEAN countries. And when we see both employers and employees, they do have a positive outlook for their own home country. However, if we look with the changes in the environment, be it rising customer expectation, digital disruption, COVID pandemic, sectoral change, this has huge and significant impact on the people side. And again, on the customer side, you're seeing rising digital channel. On the servicing and operation side, you're seeing digitalization, automation that impact a lot of the manual processes. And you're also seeing with the COVID-19 pandemic, the change ways of working, which really impact how organizations behave. And when we look at the more deeply on the talent competitiveness ranking in ASEAN, there are still significant improvement opportunities that some of the ASEAN countries needs to improve, especially if we look at Thailand, Vietnam, Philippines, and Indonesia. And there are three specific areas where this country need to improve, especially in digital skills, the quality of the vocational skills, as well as the skilled labor. So again, these are something that the ASEAN countries need to pay attention. And the second thing is that, as we all know, majority of the ASEAN economy still have a big, significant portion in manufacturing economy. And if we look at some of the big sectors in ASEAN countries, be it BPO or textile or electronics, retail, and auto, some of these big sectors in countries such as Thailand, Indonesia, Vietnam are at the risk of technology disruption, especially with automation, which will require some of the workers to be upskilled, to have a specific technical skill set, better technology proficiency, and also a more complex problem solving. At the same time, and this is again based on a recent survey that Kearney is doing with AJWC, we look at going forward having the right balance between technical skills and non-technical skills. The softer aspect would be required to have a future-ready workforce. So again, based on the interviews that we've did with companies across ASEAN, we are seeing shortage of skills, especially in skill set like software engineer, data scientists, UI, UX, but also some of the softer skill aspect like leadership skills, negotiation skills, sales and business development. So again, having this right balance and the role of university and also a private sector would be important to address these issues. On the bright side, however, given that ASEAN has a huge demographic bonus, we found out that the ASEAN youth, they realized that it's important to stay current. In fact, based on the recent survey conducted by the World Economic Forum, majority of the ASEAN youth believe that their current education and skill will need a refresh. And again, this is something that is very encouraging. And at the same time, ASEAN youth, they also are interested to go into entrepreneurship and also working in MNC, which will be a good foundation for the ASEAN economy. However, to uplift the workforce, there needs to be a systemic intervention, which require not just the government alone, but the government together with the public and private sector to address the ASEAN talent workforce. And some of it will include upskilling of the workforce. Again, we are seeing that government in ASEAN, they are giving a lot of incentive for companies to train their workers. Second is to upskill the local graduates. Again, we are seeing that there are still issues in terms of labor skill mismatch, in terms of what the university produce versus what the industry is requiring. So again, there needs to be key initiative to ensure that the local graduates are workforce ready. The third one is invite the foreign talent to actually, for knowledge transfer, especially in the skill set where we have shortages of talent. And lastly is also to ensure a healthy environment for this talent to develop. And again, the government and the private sector collaboration would be important to create an environment that makes sure that the workforce can thrive and continue to learn. And again, this is just some examples. So for example, in terms of if we compare the ASEAN countries to OECD countries, again, the percentage of training in ASEAN country is lesser. Similarly, also on the employee sides, where US companies give a lot more training hours for their employees. So again, how to make sure that companies continue to invest to address the skill gap would be important. The second one is this whole upskilling of local graduates. So I mentioned that there is still a skill gap match in terms of what the university produce versus what the industries are needed. And again, as a largest producer of local talent and to address this whole demographic bonus, it's important that the university equip the graduates with the skill set that require, whether it's like the ICT talent, complex problem solving, or some of the more technical skills and softer skills like critical, analytical, creative thinking would be required. And again, there are many global examples that ASEAN countries can learn, whether it's like, for example, in STEM development in some of the European countries, the mandatory internship policy, especially in Germany. And again, this is something that, for example, the Indonesian university is also trying to introduce. So again, some of this program would be important to upskill the local graduates. And again, I think the other thing that will need to be addressed is the digital talent and also the STEM talent as well. And if we look at majority of the countries globally, Italy, they introduce the basic computing knowledge in most of the primary schools, so they really start early. And again, Singapore, for example, they make coding compulsory for the schools. And in India, for example, they introduce value-added courses. So again, how do we really embed some of these digital courses into ASEAN starting early would be very important to make sure that our talent stays relevant. The other thing that I mentioned is about getting the foreign talent to fulfill the shortage talent supply gap, especially in certain industry and certain specific expertise. So again, examples from other companies and other countries where they introduce new work visa for executive, or they introduce work visa for tech talent and fresh graduate changing the immigration policies, incentivizing for shortage occupation. And again, ASEAN has been trying to do this, but again, this is something that's very important, especially to address some of the skill gap in certain areas. Again, I think the other thing is how the government and the organization can also create a healthy environment to make sure that the talent can continue to thrive. And again, this ranges things from policies like flexible work week. Again, we are seeing that countries such as Belgium have implemented this, and this is actually a very important policy to attract a more diverse talent as well. Remote working policy, diversity, which is now becoming a lot more important in many different countries. And again, in ASEAN, you would have different successes, like we are seeing Singapore's quite successful there, especially in certain industries. But in Indonesia, for example, the number of CEO is still 6%, and you have a pipeline leakages from, when the female talent enter into the workforce till when they become a manager. So again, also there are actions and policy that we need to think through to make sure that the talent, you can attract a lot more diverse talent, as well as some of the workplaces and workspaces to attract more startup and more entrepreneur in ASEAN as well, such as co-working spaces, connectivity, and so on and so forth. So I guess that ends a bit of the context, and I would actually hand it over to the MC before we start with our panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Please give a big round of applause to Shirley Santoso.